Hello, it's Tuesday the 20th of September and welcome to your 5-minute briefs from Seoul. I'm your host, Heejin Koo. In our second installment of the month, we take a look at President Yoon's trip to the UK, US and Canada as he seeks to push his agenda forward on North Korea and calm jitters over the won's weakness against the dollar, as well as a recent US law that excludes South Korean-made electric cars from US tax incentives. Plus, we also examine how skyrocketing costs of food are adding to household burden. We also take a look at a rosy outlook that the nation will be able to bid farewell to the worst of the pandemic in 6 months. Let's begin our 5-minute roundup. President Yoon Suk-yeol embarked on a 3-nation trip to the UK, the US and Canada, during which he will hold multiple summits as he seeks to push his agenda to bring North Korea back to the negotiating table and to calm jitters over the local currency. After a visit to London to pay his respects at the funeral for Queen Elizabeth II, Yoon heads to New York to attend the United Nations General Assembly. As the 10th speaker among the leaders of 185 member states, Yoon will pledge to coordinate international efforts to advance freedom and democracy. He also plans to hold a summit with US President Joe Biden either today or tomorrow on the sidelines of the UN Assembly, where the two leaders will likely check up on progress on their mutual agreement for a strategic partnership. Yoon is under pressure from home to resolve concerns over a recent US law that excludes electric vehicles assembled outside of North America from tax incentives, which will edge out Korean auto firms' competitiveness in the US market. The president will also likely discuss with Biden steps to quell concerns over a fast depreciating Korean won against the US dollar. South Korea's presidential office had announced plans on September 15th for Yoon to hold a separate summit with Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida on the sidelines of the UN meeting. However, Kishida's office declined to confirm the summit, saying his itinerary in New York has not been confirmed, leaving South Korean officials mum about a possible Korea-Japan summit. Yoon and Biden will likely discuss measures to stabilize the foreign exchange market, including a possible currency swap during their upcoming summit, as it is an issue of mutual concern, according to close presidential aides in Seoul. Senior Presidential Secretary for Economic Affairs Choi Sang-mok told reporters prior to Yoon's departure the summit will naturally cover the issue in broad terms. Still, Chair warned against speculation that a possible currency swap agreement was in the works, as central banks are independently in charge of such discussions rather than presidents. International investors' holdings of Korean stocks dipped to a 13-year low amid the local currency's continued slide against the US dollar and the US Federal Reserve's iron grip on monetary policy. Stocks held by foreign investors stood at 575 trillion won or $414.7 billion US dollars as of the 15th of September, or just over 30% of the benchmark Kospi's total market cap of 1.89 quadrillion won. This is the lowest level since July 27, 2009. The Korean won weakened further on the 19th of September by 5 won 60, ending the day at 1,393 won 60 against the US dollar, on concerns that the Fed will take yet another big step of a 75 basis point hike in benchmark interest rates, or even an ultra step of a full percentage point amid an accelerated inflation. The local currency has shed more than 17% in value so far this year. Analysts say that the won will breach the 1,400 won threshold amid inflationary pressure both at home and overseas. The U.S. Labor Department said on September 13th that the American Consumer Price Index in August slowed to an 8.3% on-year gain, higher than the 8.1% outlook. And another topic that will feature during the US-Korea summit is Seoul's heightened calls on Washington to resolve concerns over a US law that has left Hyundai Motor Group and other automakers in the lurch on tax incentives for electric vehicles in the US market. Seoul has been pressing Washington at every opportunity during bilateral meetings of top presidential security advisors Kim Sung-han and Jake Sullivan and between foreign ministers Park Jin and Antony Blinken. Trade Minister An Deok-keun met U.S. Trade Representative Catherine Tai on September 8th and launched talks on a ministerial level. Same can be said of President Yoon during his summit with President Biden. In fact, Biden shook hands with Hyundai Motor chief Lee San-jung when they jointly announced a record $5.5 billion investment for an EV plant in Savannah, Georgia, during his official state visit to Seoul back in May. Plans for the massive plant, which was slated to begin rolling out electric vehicles and batteries in 2025, are now up in the air, with some pushing to break ground earlier and others questioning whether it is in the best interest of the automaker to push ahead as announced. Meanwhile, turning to local inflationary woes, prices of South Korean agricultural produce, food products, as well as the cost of dining out have shot up in line with skyrocketing consumer prices, as well as global shortages and a jump in cost of main ingredients. Food prices shot up 8.4% ahead of the Chuseok Thanksgiving holiday earlier this month, the highest in 13 years. Prices of 39 food items such as pork, milk, and other goods rose in August compared to the same month last year. The price of dining out was also a key factor for the nation's 5.7% on-year jump in inflation in August, according to Statistics Korea, soaring by 8.8%, marking the biggest gain in 30 years since October 1992. It hovered in the 8% range for 3 consecutive months. And although the government expects inflation to peak in October, consumers will likely continue to feel the pinch on their wallets in the coming months, as food manufacturers such as Nongshim have indicated they will raise prices of major food items this month. High fuel and food costs will likely continue to burden household spending. On a brighter note, a senior South Korean health advisor suggested last week a possible end to COVID-19 in 6 months, echoing projections from the World Health Organization just days earlier. Jung Ki-seok, the head of the nation's advisory committee on infectious diseases, called on the government and the public to prepare for a smooth transition to post-pandemic operations in the country, citing latest infection and fatality figures. Jung's remarks echo the sentiments of the WHO Director General Tedros Ghebreyesus, who said last week that the end of the pandemic is in sight, as the international health body reported a 22% on-week drop in virus deaths worldwide. The South Korean official pointed to countries such as Britain, Germany, France, and the US that have lifted their indoor mask mandates. Chung expressed confidence that the nation will be able to effectively manage COVID-19 infections as an endemic similar to the influenza. Still, Chung agreed with the Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency on a possible spike in COVID-19 infections around late November that will be aggravated by the seasonal flu in what will likely be a so-called twindemic. The KBSI issued a flu advisory that same day for the first time since 2019 and much earlier than the typical November or December, the usual height of flu season. That wraps it up for this episode of 5-Minute Briefs from Seoul. This has been Hee Jun Koo for KBSI, wishing you a great week.